Right now, somewhere on the streets of New York, Miami, or maybe a few blocks away from where we sit in Washington, drug dealers are selling cocaine, heroin, or marijuana. These drugs entered the United States through a wide-open back door. They didn't see it come across the U.S.-Mexico or northern border. Mr. Rodney Benson, intelligence chief for the Drug Enforcement Agency, said that larger and larger loads of both cocaine and heroin were transiting, now staying, in Puerto Rico. And once these drugs are in Puerto Rico, they can cross into our borders, into the mainland. This Caribbean region is America's third border, an open door for drug traffickers and terrorists. Because Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, illegal contraband that makes it to the island is unlikely to be subjected to further U.S. Customs inspections en route to the continental United States, meaning it's easily mailed or placed on commercial aircraft without inspection. In FY 2011, 165,000 metric tons of illegal drugs were seized in the Caribbean, Bahamas, and Gulf of Mexico, up some 36% over 4 years. Up to 80% of the cocaine trafficked through Puerto Rico is directed to U.S. East Coast cities. The maritime smuggling routes widely used by international drug trafficking organizations in the 1980s, the Miami Vice era, are utilized more and more today. These routes are a threat to America's national security. The Caribbean region is also susceptible to smuggling nuclear, radiological, chemical, and biological materials, and it could be used as a staging area for violence against the United States. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan said, "Puerto Ricans have borne the responsibilities of U.S. citizenship with honor and courage for more than 64 years. They have fought beside us for decades and have worked beside us for generations." President Reagan added that Puerto Rico's strong tradition of democracy provides leadership and stability for the Caribbean. These statements also apply to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Today, that stability and the millions of American citizens in the region are under siege. And we have some maps to demonstrate the region that I'm referring to. Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands' close proximity to the continental United States and their lack of effective security infrastructures make them an appealing gateway for drug cartels. The Caribbean region is also experiencing an escalation in trafficking of persons and firearms, as well as money laundering. As these networks and drug routes evolve, so do the potential links to terrorism and transnational crime. On average, one person is murdered on the island every 7.5 hours, and at least half of those murders involve drug trafficking organizations. Last year, there were 30 homicides for every 100,000 Puerto Ricans. This rate is far higher than any state in the mainland. Drug shipments from locations including Haiti, Colombia, Venezuela, and the Dominican Republic are transported to the islands on board these fast boats and submersibles. Cargo is then dropped at obscure port locations or just simply unloaded in the water and flagged for later pickup. These locations are so remote that it can take federal law enforcement officers hours to reach them. The Caribbean region drug trafficking organizations have proved flexible, adaptable, and can change routes quickly. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service sees hundreds of weapons hidden in packages postmarked for Puerto Rico, including assault rifles, AK-47s, AR-15s, armor-penetrating cop-killer bullets. And on June 6, 2012, the Drug Enforcement Agency arrested 36 people in a drug trafficking ring that used Puerto Rico's international airport in San Juan to smuggle large quantities of cocaine off the island aboard U.S.-bound passenger flights. From San Juan, drugs were then flown to Miami, Orlando, and Newark. The drug ring had operated for 10 years inside the San Juan airport. The Caribbean region also has an active black market selling fraudulent documents. According to the Department of State, 40% of identity fraud in the United States involved birth certificates from Puerto Rico. In January, 50 people were charged with conspiring to sell the identities of hundreds of Puerto Ricans to illegal immigrants on the American mainland. This was the largest signal fraud case uncovered by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Hundreds of birth certificates, Social Security numbers, and driver's license were sold for up to $2,500 a set. James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, recently testified that terrorists and insurgents will increasingly turn to crime and criminal networks for funding and logistics. Criminal connections and activities of Hezbollah and al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb illustrate this trend. These criminal networks in the region could potentially be exploited by terrorists seeking to do us harm inside our borders. This type of exploitation was evidenced in the thwarted plot to kill the Saudi ambassador in Washington. The Iranian Quds Force attempted to solicit a Mexican drug cartel member to carry out this assassination plot. And with slide 5, we see, look at the connection between President Ahmadinejad and Chavez in Venezuela. Iran and the Bolivian states, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Nicaragua are major drug producers. They bring a new set of threats to the Western Hemisphere as they work together with transnational organized crime enterprises and terrorist groups. These threats include the potential for weapons of mass destruction related trafficking. The American flag has flown over Puerto Rico for more than a century. The people of the U.S. Virgin Islands have been American citizens for a long time. These islands are American soil, and our fellow American citizens need our support now.